Welcome to Wealth Hustle 247 podcast, your trusted guide to financial literacy, business innovation, and entrepreneurial success. Learn how to grow your wealth, make informed decisions, and turn your ideas into profitable ventures.
Before you invest another dollar, you need to see this. Welcome to Financial IQ Mastery, the one document you need to retire rich, the blueprint that could change your financial future forever.
If you have a traditional savings account right now, you are basically mathematically guaranteed to lose money.
Yeah, it's a bold claim.
Right. It's this incredibly provocative, honestly borderline aggressive claim made by the source material we are diving into today. So, welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are pretty much tearing up the conventional financial advice that, most of us were taught in school, and we're looking at a highly unconventional guide to business planning and wealth strategy.
And, the author of this text really pulls no punches. The entire premise is built on the idea that the traditional education system is just fundamentally flawed when it comes to financial literacy.
Yeah, entirely flawed.
Right. The text claims schools actually intentionally refuse to teach financial mindfulness, and instead they're training people to become what it calls a church mouse.
The church mouse.
Yeah, someone who relies entirely on the illusion of job security.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the language here is clearly designed to be a shock to the system. The author argues that maintaining this timid church mouse mentality is actually really dangerous in today's economy.
Extremely dangerous, yeah, according to the text.
And the reasoning they provide is tied to inflation and monetary policy. The text points out that we live in an era where the government is routinely printing, as they phrase it, $1 trillion in fake money every 90 days.
Right, and regardless of how anyone views central banking or modern monetary policy, the source is using this premise of fake money to create a massive sense of urgency.
Oh, for sure. It definitely gets your attention.
Exactly. The argument is that if the currency itself is constantly being devalued, playing by the old rules of, working hard and saving cash just a losing game, the goal of this document is to urge you to completely unlearn those traditional systems, master the language of money, and transition from being a passive spectator in the economy to an active producer.
A producer who builds a living, breathing asset empire instead of just, writing a 50-page business plan that sits in a desk drawer gathering dust.
Which happens way too often.
It does. The text actually calls those traditional business plans useless school projects written for a fake teacher.
I love that phrasing.
It's so good. Instead, it lays out a very specific 5-part blueprint for joining what it calls the future elite or future billionaires. And our mission today is to walk you through the mechanics of that blueprint, stripping away some of the intense marketing fluff to get to the actual actionable accounting principles underneath.
Which is where the real value is. And, the first step in that blueprint requires tearing down one of the most popular pieces of modern career advice, which is the idea that you should do what you love.
Oh, yeah, it goes right after that.
It does. The focus shifts entirely away from your internal passions and points directly toward external utility.
Right, because before you can build an empire, you have to know what you are actually selling. And the text provides this fantastic anecdote about Robert Kiyosaki's early days in business to illustrate this. His first major venture was manufacturing these nylon and Velcro surfer wallets.
Right, which was a product born out of a very specific lifestyle, but it was incredibly niche.
Super niche. The source openly calls it a janky idea. It almost completely failed because the broader public simply didn't understand what these wallets were for or why they needed them. It's like spending years inventing a beautiful, incredibly detailed map for a city that doesn't exist yet.
That's a great way to put it.
It doesn't matter how much passion you poured into the map, it's fundamentally useless to people who just need directions in the real world.
What's fascinating here is the pivot, though. The entrepreneur didn't get up on the product itself. He went looking for a real-world problem it could actually solve.
Right.
He noticed that joggers in the 1970s had this massive daily frustration. They had absolutely no place to put their keys while running in athletic gear.
Which is such a simple, localized problem.
But a universal one for that specific demographic. So by taking that exact same nylon and Velcro product and just rebranding it as a shoe pocket that laced onto a running shoe, he solved a highly specific, tangible issue.
Wow.
And that pivot turned a failing concept into a global success. So step one of this plan is identifying your specific shoe pocket. The source insists that your business plan must clearly define a pain point. because providing real-world utility is the true creator of wealth.
Okay, so you find your shoe pocket, you launch it, and people are actually buying it. The revenue starts coming in. The traditional instinct for most of us at this stage is to, like, celebrate a high gross revenue or to immediately take a huge salary.
Of course, that's human nature.
Right. But the source argues that if you just treat that new business revenue like a bigger paycheck, you are falling right back into the school project trap.
Yeah, and this is where the text demands a complete rewiring of how we measure success. It argues that you have to move your thought engine entirely out of the income column.
Wait, so if I'm not focusing on how much I'm getting paid, what am I focusing on?
Well, most of us are conditioned to obsess over our personal salary, right?
Uh-huh.
But when you sit down with a commercial banker or an investor, they do not care about your personal income, and they certainly don't care about your college grades.
They are looking for a totally different metric.
Exactly. The text introduces a very specific financial term here, which is net operating income, or NOI. It calls this your real-world report card.
So we really need to define how NOI functions here for anyone who isn't an accountant.
Yeah, let's break it down. Net operating income is essentially the revenue your asset generates minus all the operating expenses required to keep it running.
So things like maintenance, management, insurance, taxes, all of that.
Spot on. And the text is incredibly strict about this because it fundamentally redefines what an asset even is. In this blueprint, an asset is strictly defined as something that puts money in your pocket whether you get out of bed or not.
Whether you get out of bed or not. I love that framing so much. Because if a business requires your constant physical labor to keep the doors open and the revenue flowing, the source says you don't own an asset, you just own a very demanding job.
Precisely. Your business must be structured from day one to generate that independent cash flow. Bankers look at your NOI to determine the health of that engine. They want to see that the income, minus the expenses, leaves a profit margin robust enough to cover the next phase of the plan.
Which is the debt.
Yes, the debt.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because if your NOI is solid, the blueprint completely flips conventional financial wisdom on its head. It tells you to scale using something called good debt.
Yeah, this is where a lot of people get uncomfortable.
Oh, for sure. The text makes this incredibly bold claim, quoting Kiyosaki as saying that only lazy people use their own money.
It is a deliberately provocative statement. I mean, the lazy label here refers to intellectual laziness.
Right.
Because it is very easy to just drain your own hard-earned savings account to fund a business expansion. It takes far more financial intelligence to convince someone else to give you their money.
And the source argues that the secret of the top 0.1% is using OPM, which is other people's money. And it roots this strategy in a massive structural shift in the global economy, specifically pointing back to 1971 when President Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that 1971 shift fundamentally changed the mechanics of money itself.
How so?
Well, before that, currency was backed by a physical asset, right?
Yeah.
Gold. But after 1971, the dollar became a fiat currency. It is essentially backed by the full faith and credit of the government. So in a fiat system, new money is actually created into existence through the issuance of debt.
Which leads the text to conclude that in this post-1971 system, debtors are the winners and savers are the losers. Because inflation slowly eats away the purchasing power of cash sitting in a bank. But if you hold debt, you are actually paying back that loan over time with dollars that are worth less than when you borrowed them.
That is the macroeconomic theory the text leans on to justify pitching the aggressive accumulation of debt to investors.
But I have to pump the brakes here for a second because, isn't debt universally taught as a bad thing? We are constantly told to pay off our credit cards, avoid loans, and live debt-free for a reason.
That's the conventional wisdom, yes.
Right, and borrowing millions using other people's money sounds like a genius move when the market is going up. But isn't this exact kind of over-leveraging what causes massive, devastating bankruptcies during a recession? How does the text justify pitching this?
Well, this raises a really important question, and it is the exact reason why the source draws a massive, non-negotiable line between consumer debt and good debt.
Okay, so what's the difference?
When financial advisors say debt is bad, they're talking about consumer debt. That means putting a vacation on a credit card or financing a luxury car. Those things immediately lose value and generate zero cash flow. They just drain your resources.
They don't pass the get-out-of-bed test.
Exactly. But good debt, according to this blueprint, is borrowing money specifically to acquire a productive asset. And the safety net against that recession risk you mentioned is the NOI we just discussed.
Ah, so it all connects back to net operating income.
It does. The entire purpose of your business plan is essentially a pitch to prove you are an insider capable of taking their capital and generating cash. You have to prove that the asset you are buying or building generates a net operating income that is significantly higher than the cost of the debt service.
Right.
You aren't banking on the asset magically going up in value. You are relying on the math of the monthly cash flow.
And the source refers to this as generating an infinite return, which sounds crazy, but mathematically, if you put $0 of your own cash into a deal and you use an investor's money or a bank loan to buy a cash-flowing business,
And that business pays off the loan and still puts profit in your pocket.
right, then your personal return on investment is technically infinite because you invested nothing of your own.
But achieving that requires a massive psychological shift. The text points out a very common verbal habit that literally shuts down the brain.
Oh, the I can't afford it thing.
Yes. When most people look at $1 million opportunity, their default reaction is a declarative statement, I can't afford it. And the moment you say that, the inquiry ends.
The brain just goes to sleep.
Exactly. Instead, the text insists you must change that statement into a creatively triggering question, how can I afford it?
Which is such a simple shift.
It is, but it acts as a trigger. It forces your mind to start looking for structural solutions to figure out how to structure a pitch, prove your NOI, and raise the millions you need using OPM.
Okay, so you found the shoe pocket to solve a real problem. You've engineered the business to produce strong net operating income. And you've adopted the mindset to scale using OPM.
Right.
But if you were suddenly taking in millions of dollars from investors and banks, I mean, you can't just operate out of your garage under your own personal name. You need an architecture to handle it.
You absolutely do.
And that brings us to the fourth step of the blueprint.
Building the invisible architecture of wealth.
Yes. The text issues a very stark warning against trying to be a solopreneur. It uses the popular phrase, your network is your net worth, to insist that a results-driven business plan must include a very specific high-level team.
It's not a solo journey.
Not at all. It specifically calls out the need for a corporate attorney to protect you from what it calls the litigation lottery, and a CPA to navigate the 6,000-page tax code.
And the term litigation lottery is a very cynical yet highly practical way the text describes the legal landscape.
Yeah, it really is.
It implies that lawsuits are often not about seeking justice, but are random, opportunistic strikes seeking a quick payout from someone who looks wealthy.
You know, it makes me think of playing a complex strategy video game.
Oh, how so?
Well, when you start out at level 1, you are gathering your own resources, building your own little hut, and fighting off enemies with a stick, basically.
Right, doing everything yourself.
Exactly. But as your base grows into a massive castle, you realize you can't be out there chopping wood and defending the walls from coordinated attacks at the same time. You need to hire NPCs, non-player characters, to guard your base and handle the obscure mechanics of the game's economy, while you go out and focus on the main quests.
That is a perfect analogy.
Thanks. So in this financial blueprint, your corporate attorney and your CPA are basically your high-level NPCs.
They are, and their primary job, according to the text, is to help you structure your ownership so that you follow the golden rule of the wealthy, which is own nothing but control everything.
Which sounds like a riddle. How does someone own nothing but still control an empire?
By utilizing legal entities like LLCs, limited liability companies, and specialized corporations, you deliberately do not hold these valuable cash-flowing assets in your own personal name, or they are vulnerable to that litigation lottery.
So if someone sues you personally, you technically don't own the assets.
Exactly. The legal entities hold the assets, and you merely control the entities. And to explain why this is so critical, the text dives into this concept known as the cash flow quadrant.
Ah, yes. This is where we get into the actual mechanics of the tax code, and it is just a fascinating breakdown of how different people are penalized or rewarded by the system.
The quadrant divides the working world into 4 categories. You have E, S, B, and I.
Let's walk through those.
Sure. The E stands for employee. You trade your time for a paycheck. The S stands for self-employed or small business. Think of a freelancer or a solo doctor. You essentially own a job.
And the text argues that operating in the E and S quadrants is the most dangerous financial position.
Yes, because you are subjected to the highest possible tax rates.
In fact, the source bluntly calls high earners in the S quadrant high-paid slaves to the government. because you take all the personal risk, you do all the labor, and then you just hand over a massive percentage of your earnings.
And the structural reason for this is how the tax is applied. In the E and S quadrants, you earn money, the government immediately takes its cut in taxes, and then you have to try and live off whatever is left over.
So it's earn, pay taxes, then spend.
Exactly the opposite of the right side of the quadrant. The goal of this entire legal architecture is to move your operations into the B for business owner and I for investor quadrants.
Okay, so how are those different?
Well, in the B quadrant, you own a system that generates money. In the I quadrant, your money generates more money. And the mechanics of the tax code dramatically favor these quadrants.
Because the formula flips.
It flips completely.
Okay.
Through your LLCs and corporations, you earn money, you spend that money on allowable business expenses to grow the empire, which is handled pre-tax, and then you only pay taxes on the net income that is left over.
Earn, spend, then pay taxes.
Precisely. The text explains that by structuring your empire properly with your CPA, you can legally utilize depreciation and reinvestment strategies to drop your effective tax rates to 20%, or in some cases, legally down to 0%.
Wow. And while the language in the source is undeniably hyped-like, they are constantly talking about future billionaires and dodging the litigation lottery. When you strip away the aggressive marketing tone, the underlying accounting principles here are just standard institutional wealth-building tools.
Absolutely. It's just leverage, asset protection, and tax advantage cash flow.
Right. So let's zoom out and look at the whole board here. We have found a shoe pocket to solve a real problem. We're obsessing over net operating income. We're using other people's money to scale. And we've built this LLC fortress to protect it all.
You've built the engine.
Exactly. So what does this all mean? What is the final destination of this business plan?
That brings us to the fifth and final step of the document, which the author calls the McDonald's formula.
Yes, and this is arguably the most famous anecdote in modern business lore. The text details the story of Ray Kroc, the man who turned a single burger stand into the global McDonald's franchise. And it makes this really counterintuitive assertion. Ray Kroc was never actually in the hamburger business.
Even though billions of hamburgers were the product changing hands every single day.
Right. The hamburgers were just the shoe pocket. The text argues that Ray Kroc was actually running a massive real estate empire.
Which is brilliant when you think about it.
It's genius. He used the daily predictable cash flow generated by selling cheap burgers and fries to systematically buy up some of the most valuable commercial land in the world, which were the prime intersection corners where the restaurants sat. And then he leased that land back to his own franchisees.
And this reveals the ultimate purpose of everything we've unpacked today. The business engine you are building is not the end goal itself. The business is merely a vehicle.
Just a tool.
Right. It is a tool designed to generate consistent tax-advantaged cash flow.
And the ultimate purpose of that cash flow is to acquire hard assets. The text specifically points to physical real estate, commodities, or basically anything that holds intrinsic value. The idea is to trade the fake money generated by the business for tangible assets that will outlast economic cycles and inflation.
The source is very realistic about the execution, though. It emphasizes a concept called failing forward.
Which means?
It means your first shoe pocket might not work. Your business plan is just the first iteration. You're going to make mistakes, but the goal is to learn the mechanics of NOI and OPM so you can keep iterating, keep generating cash, and keep funneling it into lasting assets to build a multi-generational legacy.
It is just a complete inversion of the school project mentality. You aren't writing a plan to get a gold star from a fake teacher. You are engineering a financial machine.
Exactly.
And to lock in that mindset shift, the source document actually ends with a very intense call to action. It playfully but seriously challenges readers to publicly commit to building their financial fortress by going into the comments section and typing the exact phrase, "I will be rich."
It forces a public declaration. It demands that the reader stop being a spectator and actually put their intention on the record to stay accountable to a community of future billionaires.
It is definitely a polarizing way to end a financial guide, but I have to say it perfectly matches the aggressive, rule-breaking ethos of the entire document.
It really does.
So, to synthesize this journey for you, the text challenges us to abandon the myth of the desk drawer business plan. It demands that we create a living, cash-flowing asset engine, one that solves real problems, is fueled by the strategic use of good debt, is shielded by an impenetrable legal architecture, and is ultimately designed with one single goal: buying hard assets that stand the test of time.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder that pushes this concept a bit further. The source focuses heavily on the McDonald's formula, using cash flow to buy physical hard assets like real estate to outlast inflation.
Right, the physical dirt and concrete.
Exactly. But if we apply the McDonald's formula to your own life today, if your current job or daily routine is just the hamburger business, what is the real estate, the lasting hard asset that you should be secretly acquiring behind the scenes?
That is a fascinating question and exactly the kind of critical thinking this text is trying to provoke. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning those traditional rules, keep searching for your own shoe pocket solutions, and keep exploring entirely new ways of thinking. We will catch you next time.
That's it for today's episode of Wealth Hustle 247. Be sure to follow, like, comment, and share with others. Keep pushing toward your goals, and we'll see you in the next episode.